We continue here on Sports Talk Live. Leland Faust has written a book called A Capitalist's Lament. Mr. Faust, an author, financial expert, also triathlete, of which I am jealous of because I've run one. He seems to run more and do quite well at the one, especially the one in San Francisco, Leland, which is not an easy one. That's the Alcatraz one, right?
Right, well, he escaped from Alcatraz. One year, the pro who won it was interviewed on TV afterward, and he said except for the Ironman, it was the toughest one he'd ever done.
Unbelievable. And you saw, I think you set the swim record in that one as well, right?
Well, for my age.
Yeah, well, still. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Any way you do it. All right, A Capitalist Lament. Let's start with this one. What's your message in this particular book?
Well, the message in The Capitalist Lament is that I am very unhappy with how mainstream Wall Street is functioning for us. I am a firm believer and always have been in a free market, but Wall Street, I believe, has hijacked it so that they can make more money for themselves and put us all at greater financial risk. And so the book is my experiences in observing this for literally 40 years in practice, and then culling some things which were in the public record, which I noticed at the time, but was very unhappy about.
You know, it's interesting. We can put it on Wall Street, or how about if I countered and said, it's not just Wall Street. Wall Street has to get an approval from our government. Is the government at all at fault here?
Oh, absolutely, the government's at fault, and that's sort of another book for another time.
Okay.
This one is about the Wall Street side of it, although I do have a chapter in there on enforcement, which is sort of missing in action, and I think that's been a big problem. We need to fix that too. But this book is primarily, about how Wall Street causes the problems, and fortunately for the readers, I do have a chapter at the end with a whole bunch of suggestions as to how to protect yourselves from that and prosper.
But you don't start at the last one. Get all the way through it, understand where it's from, then you get to all the answers from Leland Faust. All right, you're also big into sports, and I want to know a lot of your financial thought, how it relates to different things in sports. Let's start with this one. How is it that athletes are underpaid?
Well, obviously, when I say that, people say, come on, you must be kidding. But I'm not, because when people talk about athletes and think about athletes being overpaid, they think in terms of school teachers or doctors or lawyers. And obviously, with respect to those people, they're overpaid. But that's not the group they're members of. They're athletes who are members of entertainment industry, and television stars make a lot of money. And that's what the athletes are. They're highly skilled and unique television stars. So that's where I start that analysis from.
It's funny, I did a speech on that in college. Used the exact same example of how much musicians make and how much Larry Bird made, and at the time Magic Johnson, to show you how old I was. So I understand your theory on that one. I'm going to move it along, though, to how do athletes, now we hear of them making such large sums of money, but then we often hear of them losing all that money. How do they fall into a scenario where they get such bad advice?
Well, I think they fall into that trap because of a number of factors. First of all, the obvious, they're very young. And so if you're young and you haven't had a chance, as most wealthy people have, to learn about money slowly, you make a little, you get a nice raise, 20 years later you're making a lot of money if things go really well. Athlete goes from nothing at age 18, 19 to making millions of dollars a year, and they're not prepared for that. Very few people would be. And the other problem is that many of the athletes, or maybe most of the athletes, don't come from wealthy families. So therefore it's even more of a problem because they're not used to being around people with money. So then when the slick salesman comes around, they're really easy to fall victim to it.
And that's unfortunate when it happens. I think everyone agrees to that one. The NFL is the biggest league going in the world. It's the biggest beast in the world. You can argue Premier League in England. But what business does the NFL truly sell?
Well, I think it sells a number of things. First of all, as everybody would say, I think it sells violence. And their resistance to cleaning that up, in my view, has just been so extreme. And I've represented hundreds of NFL players, and a few years ago I was very concerned about the violence. This is before the concussion stuff started to come out. I wrote a letter to both the head of the union and the commissioner saying, this is who I am, and I'd like to help you work with this. Here's some examples of problems. And this is about 5 or 6 years later, I'm still waiting for a response. So violence is certainly one. I think another thing is sort of community. we want to root for our home team. This is not just NFL now, but it's all. So we want to be part of San Francisco, root for the 49ers, even though right now they're not doing very well. Yeah. But seriously, we want to have an identity and root for our team, so I think we're selling that. The other thing they're selling, which they don't want to talk about, is gambling. And their support for fantasy football isn't because they care who can figure out who's going to gain the most yards yesterday. It's because that keeps interest in the games right up to the end. Can somebody make an interception? Can somebody, in the old days we just cover the spread. But now they've even got more of it going on with the gambling, and I think that's a huge factor too.
All right, I want to move from football to baseball. And this includes the Giants, right? You go back to last offseason. The Giants looked to be the favorites to maybe get Zach Greinke. Had a pitcher, spent a lot of money on a guy like Zach Greinke. In the end, the Arizona Diamondbacks swoop in and they sign him. But have the Diamondbacks doomed themselves for the future by doing this?
Well, I think they have, unless they're prepared to spend unimaginable amounts of money to build that team. They made the mistake that one player does not a team make. And you can't have a situation like the Diamondbacks now do, where one player is making about $35 million a year, and then the rest of the team is making maybe $70 million a year, something like that. You have to have consistency on your team to win in baseball. So yeah, if you're the Yankees and he's the one missing player, maybe that gets you there. But if you're the Diamondbacks, it doesn't work that way.
All right, there was a scenario in a position that seemed to be that last gasp effort for teams like the Nationals and the Cubs. The Dodgers had one. It was a closer. It's a closer. You have Melanson and Chapman and Jansen. All these guys now they're going to be sought after as free agents. So the closer role in Major League Baseball, Giants need a closer. Are teams using closers in the right fashion, or is there another way that we should be viewing the position of a closer?
Well, I think the people who are closers should thank the person who came up with the save concept about 40 years ago, because it allows them to make a whole lot of money for the most part. And I know I'm going to get a lot of back.
You're going to get flack.
You're
going to get flack
for doing very little. And the closer, in my view, is the biggest myth in baseball. The important thing isn't pitching the ninth inning; it's being ahead going into the ninth inning. And unfortunately, we could spend half an hour talking about the stats that prove that. But strange but true, and I want to, at least part of this discussion is, so how should you use your closer? If your closer is your best relief pitcher, in fact, in the National League, where you have to hit, the best thing to do with that so-called closer would have him start the game.
Really?
Now, yes.
Why?
Well, for two reasons. Nobody goes 9 innings.
Right.
Number two, in the last 60 years in baseball, if you're ahead going into the ninth inning, I don't care who you are, 95% win percentage. And when the closer pitches the ninth inning, he may pitch to the middle of the order, the top of the order, the bottom of the order. If he pitches the first inning, he pitches to the best hitters on the other team. So you get your best pitchers pitching to the best hitters. And then in the National League, as soon as he comes up, you hit for him.
Are you on Theo Epstein and Billy Bean's speed dial?
I wish I were, but I certainly believe in what they do, and have been a big fan of analysis for a long time. Even though, as you said, I take flack for it.
That's the best part of it, doing sports, right? Is when you do it.
That's what we got to debate. We got to have something to talk about.
Exactly. If we all had the same thoughts, it wouldn't be a fun debate. Here's a good book: A Capitalist's Lament: How Wall Street is Fleecing You and Ruining America. Leland Faust. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on sports. And go get the book. Read this. This is very smart, very good stuff on finance. I do appreciate your insights, Leland.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
All right, take care.